beautiful Friday morning it is up here in Bangalore on the north coast. It's just stunning. It's around 23 degrees. It's the middle of winter and it is just gorgeous. I see we've got a bunch of people in the room and we've got beautiful Jenni. How are you, Jenni?
Good morning.
You're just looking gorgeous and glamorous.
Hi.
And Maureen, you're looking gorgeous and glamorous too.
I thought I should make an effort.
Hello, Maureen. So nice to see you.
So nice to see you too, Jenni. It's nice to see you in real life rather than just the photos or,
That's right. And we're all
physically here, I know, right?
We're all joining today from different parts of the East Coast. So we have Jenni, you're up in Brisbane, right? Maureen, are you in Tweed?
I am up in Brisbane. I apologise. I'm sitting outside in the sun.
That's beautiful.
Yes.
Where are you from, Maureen?
Yeah, Tweed Heads. So sorry, I'm
beautiful.
just pausing my robot vacuum cleaner because it's making a bit of a noise there. Just get it to stop. Sorry about that.
I'm about 50 minutes south of Maureen, or 45 on a good day, in Bangalore. So we're all in a sunnier part of Australia.
Definitely.
It's very beautiful.
As I've travelled all the East Coast, it's still some of the best part of the world up this way.
Yes, I totally agree. Absolutely. Totally agree. I'm up to 22 years living here now, and I know we only thought we were going to come for a couple of years, and 22 years later, we're still here.
It's awesome. Yeah.
That was my thought. I grew up in Melbourne. I like the cold, and now I'm sitting here in Brisbane in a scarf. What's happened to me? I don't know if I can go back to Melbourne now.
So today in BiteSize Conversations, we have a very big and very important topic. So we're talking about diversity and the do's and don'ts. And I'm going to get each person, we'll introduce ourselves a little bit so that we can explain what our experience is in those areas. And so I'd like to welcome Maureen Shelley, who's joining us today from Kylie International. Jenni and I have been talking behind the scenes on this topic for, I was going to say a while, but really it's well over a year now.
Yeah, definitely.
Where these bits come into it and the awkwardness for people around some of these topics and how to share them on their channels and within their business, etc. So how about Jenni, you introduce yourself first.
Hello, I'm Jenni. I'm a Bundjalung woman from Northern Rivers, New South Wales, where Kylie's living. I'm the founder of Elephant in the Room Consulting. And I guess as an Aboriginal woman, I've had a lot of conversations around diversity and also being a female business owner. So there's lots of kind of points of reference in relation to diversity and inclusion in that place, both in business as well as in personal life. So I'm so excited about this conversation today.
Me too. And Maureen, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi, Maureen Shelley from the Copy Collective, and we're storytellers and clearly a woman in business, but I have a disability, which most people don't know about. I have two children who have different disabilities, including mental health issues. And my husband is totally blind, and we're a rainbow employer, and we've had employees transition during their employment with us. So, I look at it from a few different perspectives, and it never ceases to amaze me how offensive people can be, and they don't mean to be. They really don't, but they really are. So, yeah, Kylie, topic well overdue to be talked about.
Yes, absolutely. And I'm Kylie Mowbray-Allen from Hello Media, and I just come in with a lot of personal opinions on all the matters. That's really my experience. I do have my own disability. I wear hearing aids. I'm not sure how much of a disability that is because I feel like I get a little superpower when I put my hearing aids in. So enjoying the rest of the world, but also I love taking them out at night and shutting out the world too. That's a good bonus. But my biggest experience around that area of disability, and that is 14 years ago, my husband broke his neck playing rugby and is a quadriplegic, so paralyzed from the neck down. And interestingly enough, I'd never met anyone in a wheelchair before my husband had his accident.
Oh, wow.
And I realized very, very quickly that probably what I would have done walking past someone in a wheelchair or with some kind of a very obvious physical disability is possibly would have just looked away because I didn't know where to look and all of that. So my journey over the last 14 years with him has been astounding, and I definitely know I'm a better person since the experience, and so is everybody around us, really, and sharing the journey with him and learning along the way. So mine's very much just coming in from observations and opinions, but like Maureen, I'm always astounded at the things that people say, not just to him, but also to me about him. It's a very, very...
Kylie, you've been around in so many different places, and particularly in your role as a digital marketer, you have to deal with this diversity issues all the time. You may just not call it that. And I think that's the interesting thing about diversity is sometimes we're dealing with issues in conversations, and definitely, Maureen, I imagine in your world as well, we're dealing with the idea of diversity and how to be inclusive in our language and how to not offend people. Every single day we write a post on Facebook or send an email burst out or create a program. We should always be mindful of how it's going to be received by the people that we're writing content for.
Absolutely. I was just doing some content with a client yesterday who runs a community organization, and we were preparing content in advance, and we were wanting to look at NIDOC week, which then she called it NAIDOC week. So immediately our discussion was around, which way are we even meant to be pronouncing it? But then she said, actually, I think before we write anything, I'll just quickly get in touch with the person in charge of Indigenous issues within her organization. So we worded exactly right. So I think that's the thing for so many of us. We want to put things out there. We just don't always know the appropriate way. And we probably know more now than ever before how important it is to get it right. And
100%.
Not get it wrong. Yeah. Excuse me.
So Maureen, what's been your experience? So we're both going to say the same thing. What is your experience, Maureen, in dealing with this issue with your business?
Well, particularly around my employees who transitioned, and changed their pronouns. Some people consider that to be a really insignificant issue. And I've had people say to me, what do you mean they changed their pronouns? How can you change your pronouns? You are what you are. But of course, human beings, gender is a spectrum. And I think, I know a person, and she is, her pronouns are she, her. She's a married woman, and when she was born, she was brought up as a boy for 3 years. And then for whatever reason, they went, no, she's a girl. And, but that happened when she was very small. So it really didn't impact on her, and it didn't worry her. And her biggest issue growing up was her hair, because she has the most gorgeous red curly hair. And, it took her until in her 20s to get her hair the way she was happy. But, she is a person who's experienced transitioning at a very young age, so hasn't had the emotional baggage with it, and has no problem with who she is and what she is and how she presents to the world. But I've had, as I said, employees become asexual or transition from one gender to another. I've had employees who don't identify as binary at all, and so they use the pronouns of they. I've had people just say to me, that's just ridiculous. What makes them decide to do that? But these are issues that are very important to the person. It's about who they are. And to me, the important thing is, can they do the job? Are they good at it? Am I treating my employee well? Are they happy in their work? And if all of those answers are yes, then what do I care? What they call themselves or how they present or what they might do in their private life. That's their business, and I'll just accommodate whatever needs that they have and how I can support them.
So would your most important thing around that, do you think, then be talking with them directly and saying, how do you want to be referred to? How do you want to be acknowledged, etc.?
Yeah, and the reason that it was really interesting, because the reason it came up, because I wasn't bothered by this at all, but the superannuation laws changed, and I had to update our accounting system and assign a gender. to my employees, which of course I'd never done before. Who does that? But Xero said, no, you've got to pick a gender. And so a few of us lobbied Xero so that they said, male, female, or I think now you have the option of other. But back then you didn't. You had to pick yes or, male or female. And so I just said to the person, each of my employees, what gender do you want me to pick? Since I'm forced to pick one, what do you want? And then they told me, and I put that in, which really upset the actuarial data of some of the people, because the genders that people chose were ones that they identified with and not necessarily the ones that, the actuarial data people would have thought they should have selected. But anyway, that's their problem, not mine. So, but yeah, random things come up when you're an employer.
Absolutely. And what about with your husband? And can you tell us a little bit about the really important role that he had there for quite some time?
So I'm very fortunate to be married to Graham Innes. We've been married for 32 years, and Graham used to be the Human Rights Commissioner, Disability Discrimination Commissioner. I think he was Race Discrimination Commissioner for a while. I'm not sure if he was ever Sex Discrimination Commissioner, but he certainly had about 3 or 4 roles at the Human Rights Commission. He was there for about 19 years, all up. And he appears regularly on the drum. He's been on the project, so he's, he was on the drum just this week, one night. So he's what I call semi-famous. And so we'll get stopped in Bunnings or in Aldi, and people will come up to me and say, is he your husband? And I'll say, excuse me, who are you, random person? And they just want, and they'll say, and he'll be standing right there. And he'll say, they'll say to me, I just want to tell you that he's fantastic. And I'll go, Graham, this person says you're fantastic. And Graham says, oh, thanks very much. And once the person's got his name, they're quite happy to talk to him. But it's like this, because Graham can't see them, it's like they're not allowed to talk to him directly. They have to use an interpreter. It's the strangest thing. And after 30 odd years, I'm still not used to it. And I never know what to say to them, to find a way that isn't awkward to say, please talk to Graham directly. He's right here. He's not deaf. He can hear you. Just have a chat. But
we have such similar situations in our relationship too, Maureen. It's very, very odd. And I agree with you. I don't think it's something that you get used to.
No, because these people are being nice. They're not being, like there are some people who want to be horrible. And I think, Kylie, I told you about the time when our daughter was a baby and Graham used to take her to work and, because we shared the parenting, obviously, And he was at the train station in St. Leonard's and he had the baby in a capucci on his chest, and some woman just walked up to him and said, what's your name? And he said, I beg your pardon. And she said, what's your name? I'm going to report you to the police. And he said, well, I don't know who you are and what your problem is, but, why would you do that? And she said, people like you shouldn't have children. Like, just came straight out and said, people like you. So blind people obviously have no right to have children, no right to a family in this person's mind. Absolutely
extraordinary, isn't it?
It does seem that these days, I think over time, and to some extent, I think it's getting worse in that we like to have a very clear image of what good or what right looks like. And we've spent many, many years deciding what right looks like as a society or as a community. And so if you don't fit that mold, then you suddenly sort of sit outside the scope of right and wrong. And what I'm enjoying about the current conversation of diversity and inclusion just generally is the fact that we're starting to see that there is no, as you said earlier, Maureen, there's a spectrum of everything. There's no black or white with anything anymore. And it's about where we sit and where we choose to show up on that spectrum about every different topic. But it's such an interesting conversation that somebody feels that they have the right to actually tell somebody else or impose their values or their judgment on each other. And even to this day, I still find that fascinating that we as humans think it's our right to do that.
Yes, yeah.
Or some do, should I say.
And women experience that a lot. I mean, we all have children, but if you've ever been pregnant, complete strangers feel that it's quite okay to come up and touch your stomach. Like, in what other circumstances would you get in a lift and somebody want to put their hands on your stomach? You're just like, really? Seriously? Yeah, I wanted to have a T-shirt, you know, when I was pregnant saying, don't touch. A bit like Graham's guide dog has got a little sign on it that says, do not pat. I'm working. Richard
wants one of those for his head because sitting in a wheelchair, people will often do a pat, pat, pat on the head. It's like, I know. I'm a grown man. Why are you patting me on the head? I'm not free.
Wow. And sorry, you go ahead, Jenni.
I was just going to say, Louise Geary has shared with us that, you know, because she has a son with a disability, and she said that she's had people ask her questions over the top of her son's head like he's not actually there, simply because he doesn't look the same and isn't the same as us. And it's amazing that, again, it goes back to that perception of what we think or how we believe people should be.
Yeah. Well, we had a party recently, and this is around about still with the diversity of women, you know, just women not being accepted. And so we celebrated our 32nd wedding anniversary. We had a party. We had, you know, our friends over. And so these are our friends. These are nice people. These are people who know and I like. And one guy who, you know, is a retired engineer, so, you know, not somebody lacking in education, said to Graham, something about the woman who doesn't have enough clothes on. Like, well, how many levels is that wrong? Firstly, talking to a blind man about what some woman's wearing, he would have no idea, firstly. Secondly, there was no one at the party who didn't have enough clothes on. And it took me a while, and I finally worked out that one of our friends is a university lecturer, and she's a yoga teacher. So she was wearing yoga clothes, like perfectly covered, like, you know, to her wrists and ankles. But obviously, you know, because she's super fit, you know, her clothes were a bit form-fitting, but not inappropriately or tight. But this man just felt that it was okay for him to have a chat about what this woman was wearing to a man who would never, ever think of those things. So I was just like, it's wrong on so many levels. So many levels.
It is really wrong. I really could write a book on the wrong things people have said to me, but one thing that actually a friend of mine said to me not long after Richard's accident, and she goes, well, you know, I know it's awful. I know it's really bad, but he could have been like disfigured in his face or something, and at least he's still good looking, even if his body doesn't work. I was like, yeah, wow, yeah, scars would definitely be
definitely preferable. Absolutely. Yeah. And there's a disability activist, Kylie Findlay, and she has a skin condition where she's quite red in the face, you know, I believe all the time. And she talks about, you know, having, you know, an appearance that's different and all of the stuff she has to deal with, you know, and people say to her constantly that she should, you know, like people tell Graham he should wear sunglasses so people don't have to look at his unsighted eyes. And people tell Kylie Findlay that she should wear makeup or not go out or wear a scarf or whatever, you know, to cover herself up. So, you know, people without those disabilities don't have to look at her. It just...
I have a question for you, Maureen and Kylie. Where do you think this comes from, though? Where do you think these conversations and this belief comes from about those questions of saying, you know, you need to change your appearance because it's going to make me more comfortable, or your husband should wear a pair of sunglasses because it will make, you know, it's more comfortable for others. Why do we feel that this is still a conversation we're having in 2021?
I think it comes back to what Kylie said earlier, Jenni, where she said that before Richard had his accident, she'd never met anyone in a wheelchair. You know, we've grown up with segregated schools. You know, like people with disabilities are kept somewhere in, you know, appropriate housing or appropriate accommodation. They're special schools. And so there hasn't been an inclusive society. And we've had that. I mean, we've seen it around women. We've seen it around Indigenous people. You know, we've had, you know, White Australia policy. Australia has had a history of segregation. And it's really only now in the 21st century that we're all going, well, hang on a minute. we're all human beings. We belong to the one race. We all have value. So what's going on here? And I think now, and if you look at the surveys of young people, people under 30, most of them don't have these, many of them don't have the same issues. I'd be interested, Kylie, in your experience with young people. I know you've got children, you'd have teenagers around. Do you find that your daughter's friends are more accepting?
Absolutely. So she's 18 and was 4 when Richard had his accident. So it's pretty much all she knows. And it has been fascinating watching the whole thing. But also when it comes to Indigenous issues, cultural issues, if I've got a cute little Chinese accent that I do, and she finds it very offensive. She said, Mum, you're being racist. And I'm like, no, I'm not. It's my it's my cute accent. But you think about all those people that are really clever at doing their accents. I'm not clever at doing any of them, let's be honest, but I've always really enjoyed trying to do accents. But she's even saying that that's politically incorrect, and I'm like, wow. So yeah, I definitely think that they're growing up and coming through with a completely different view on what's acceptable, what's not. And particularly with her dad, it's like it's no big deal to her. It's just is what it is. So obviously she's got a lived experience of that, or living alongside it, which is different. But I find that her friends are all very, it's not a big deal. But years ago, I had somebody come and do a trial with me for work, and I had a different company, and I was based from our garage, lots of couriers in and out and all kinds of things going on with this e-commerce business. And this one lady came, and I said, so sometimes if I'm on the phone and a couple of the other girls are busy or whatever, you might need to just get Richard a glass of water or something. Like, the reason I work from home is because I need to be here for him. And she said to me right in front of him, I actually wouldn't be comfortable with doing something like that for him. And I said, getting him a glass of water. And she said, no, I don't really know how to talk to handicapped people.
Oh, God.
He was sitting right there. And I said, oh, I don't think we actually use the term handicap anymore. But also, he's not. He's like, he literally just say to you, hey, would you mind filling up my water bottle or something? Like, it was so intensely weird and uncomfortable. But actually, all I felt was sorry for her. I really did. I thought, how could you have got to be in your 30s and feel that uncomfortable with getting someone a glass of water? Like, how extraordinary, my goodness. I said to her, we're not asking you to be his carer and do any personal care with him. It's just a glass of water. But clearly she wasn't the right person to be working with us. Good
recruitment selection process, Kylie. And I see Louise says she believes it's about other people's fear and lack of experience. And I think that's it. I was talking to my sales coach about these offensive statements, because the one about the woman being not having enough clothes on wasn't the only offensive statement said to women at my party that night, which I feel so bad about. I have a friend who's a bit older than me. She's in her 70s, and I've known her for 30 plus years. We're good friends. We've been through some real tragedies in both of our lives together and supported each other. And one of my other friends said to my close friend, have you had sex since you've divorced? And I've never talked to my friend of 30 years about sex and her sex life ever. But this complete stranger, this completely random man to her, feels that he's okay to talk to her about her sex life. And some of the other people at the party said to me, well, really, he was coming from a point of curiosity. He was interested in about older people and their sex lives. And I'm like, well, why does your curiosity mean that you can just be rude and offensive? Like, what gives you that permission? And I do think people just feel that curiosity is a sufficient excuse to be offensive. They don't think they're being offensive. They feel that they have the right to ask whatever questions they want. And I was having this conversation with my sales coach, and he actually said, well, I just think people do come from a point of curiosity. And if you say, look, I'm curious, I'm really genuinely curious, he felt that was sufficient. And that's a point that he and I disagree on quite a lot, because I don't think your curiosity trumps my right to be treated with dignity.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really, really big issue, that one. And so it's giving yourself permission, isn't it, to put anything out there, really, if you say it comes down to curiosity. But I totally agree with what Louisa said and what you said, that I think it's just from ignorance, and it's not ignorant necessarily in a particularly negative way, although we have many instances of appalling ignorance. I'll just give you an example. We were watching my niece play soccer last Sunday, and we're on this path, and there were 3 teenage girls that were around 15 walking towards us, and there's Richard on the chair, but he couldn't go off, on the path. He couldn't go off the path because it was mud. So that's no good for his chair. Yet all the rest of us wearing shoes could very easily have walked so he could stay on the path, but they chose not to. The 3 of them just stayed side by side. They didn't even go in a single file so that he could get past. And so he just stopped and waited till eventually they parted. There was nothing he could do. It was like, how extraordinary. They were very ignorant and rude. And we find that kind of thing, a fair bit, unfortunately. But I definitely think not everybody's doing it coming from a bad place.
No.
I think when we just don't understand, and I just want to share one more thing about an amusing disability anecdote before I ask Jenni some questions on Indigenous issues. But that is, people have been saying odd things to us for a very long time, and mostly we've learned if you just deal with them with humor, that's our best way. And for Richard particularly, he's a very funny guy, and he comes up with some really wacky stories about, particularly for kids, because he loves it when the kids ask the questions, because the parents will be doing the whispering and they don't look at him and that kind of thing, and he's just happy to share or whatever. But this one time they got a hoist installed at a local pool, and after a lot of fighting to get this hoist, of course they didn't follow through and do all the other things that were required. So it was a bit of a debacle getting him onto the hoist from his chair. We had to take our own hoist to get him onto the pool hoist. So there's Clover and I trying to maneuver him to come down, be lowered down into the pool. Now this hoist that they got, this chair, was done, I don't know the right words for it, but the way that it was operated was with water. So as we would wind him down slowly into the pool, it would shoot this giant whale spout up behind him. So he was quite a spectacle anyway. And there he is. And the pool was, a hot day. The pool was absolutely chocker with families. And it was literally like the royalty had arrived. As he was being lowered down, the whole pool stopped what they were doing. The splashing stopped, the talking stopped. Everyone turned and stared as he just was lowered, like so slowly. And then as he got down, he just looked at this one kid who was closest to him and went, "What? Did you get your eyes for Christmas?" And the guy just cracked up, and then everybody went about their way and all of that. But it was like, wow, just to be stared at that intensely.
Yeah.
It's so crazy. And then I said, I'd only tell one more, but I've got one more, which is my other favorite that we laugh about regularly. And that I saw a woman in town that I know in Bangalore. And she said, "Oh, come over. I want you to meet this person." So I went over and she said, "Oh, you haven't met Kylie, but you've probably seen her around." And her husband's Richard, the guy in the wheelchair, because Richard's the only guy in a wheelchair in Bangalore. And she said, "Really? He has a wife? I thought he was homeless and lived under the bridge." Unfortunately, at the time, Richard he was growing dreadlocks in his beard as a little experiment. So, yes, that was not entirely savory, but that said, we live in the Byron Shire. There's a lot of dreadlocks around. But anyway, unfortunately, I was just too gobsmacked at the time to come up with anything to say that would have been a little gold thing to respond with. So instead, all I said was, "How do you think he charges his chair?" Because clearly that needs power. But obviously there was a lot better things I could have said to that. But isn't that extraordinary that someone with that amount of disability, and how would you be in a power chair and live under a bridge? There's no power in a bridge. Anyway, there you go. That's my experience. So Jenni, I'd love to ask you some questions, or for you to share some things around Indigenous issues and how, particularly do's and don'ts of what we should and shouldn't say. I know we touched on it a few weeks ago.
I think the do's and don'ts questions is such a big question in itself. And I think, and Louise made a really good comment, that adults' curious questions are often coming from an underlying judgment or ignorance in them. So they're asking in that kind of tone of like, why aren't you or don't you, kind of in that slight judgment perspective. I think when you're dealing with anything in relation to Indigenous issues, the reality is that I'm an Indigenous woman. I'm one of many hundred nations, or one representative of many hundred nations, and I don't speak for all Aboriginal people. And I think that's one of the biggest things, is people make an assumption that one Aboriginal person will speak and know the mindset of every other Aboriginal people, in the same way you, Kylie, must know all the ins and outs of New Zealanders, right? And so we assume that with an Aboriginal person that we can ask questions around, what's happening here or what's happening there, what do you think about this and how does that work? When actually, in fact, we have our own opinions based on our own cultural norms in our own communities, just like everybody else has. And so the assumption that one Indigenous person represents everybody is, I think, the biggest awareness that needs to be made. In the same way, as you say, Kylie, you and Maureen, and you with your husbands, you don't speak for every person who has the same disability, the same situation. So it's about recognizing that we all have different experiences, and that creates this shared experience. So I think from my perspective, it's about when you meet somebody who's different to you, ask yourself, what's your intention of the communication? Is it about creating a shared experience and learning and growing and understanding? Or is it about, am I coming from a place of judgment? And that's a really hard question to ask. Yeah. If I ask this question, is it because I think I don't get it and I actually want to know? Or am I asking the question because I want to affirm or confirm a bias that I have based on my experience? Yeah. And I think it's a really simple way to ask a question before you even think about it is, why am I asking? And what's the intent? I think if we, regardless of what it is, I mean, I've got children and I've got my daughter's going through lots of changes at the moment. And at her school, there are children who are 12 who are going through transition, or who are identifying as non-binary, or identifying as and their pronouns are changed from he or she to they. And that's a 12. And we can't even imagine that as a 47-year-old woman when, we grew up, and if you felt a little bit kind of masculine, you were just a tomboy. We didn't put those defined labels. So as we become more open around where we sit on the spectrum, we're almost wanting to relabel ourselves because we can't deal with, they're just them. Doesn't matter whether they're male or female or whatever they are, they're just them, right? But we feel as a society, we need to put them in a box, and there needs to be a label attached to them, because then it makes it easier for us to have the conversation. So does that make sense?
Yeah, totally
absolutely.
About the term tomboy. You're so right. In every class I was ever in, there was always a tomboy or two. And I totally had forgotten that. I hadn't heard that term in a very long time.
Yeah, because we now have this, because there is, and I understand the importance of raising awareness and the identity issue. I mean, as an Aboriginal person, identity issue is, it's an important part of our life, right? Or for me at least. And so for people who are going through transition, people who are changing their, pronouns or not, are feeling fluid in who they are, having an identity or having a label gives them some grounding and gives you a bit of connection to the land, if you like, a connection to who you are. But the reality is, we shouldn't care what the label is. It shouldn't matter whether you're, what country you come from, what nationality you relate to, what religion you relate to, do you consider yourself to be disabled or an abled person? Do you consider yourself to be, that you have a disability, or do you not? This is just who you are. And I think I would love to see a move towards that space where we're just not worrying about the label that attaches, and the person just is. So we meet Rich, and Rich is just Rich. Your husband, Maureen, is just your husband, right? He's just who he is. And I know, granted, he's a very known and recognized man, but that doesn't change who he is. It shouldn't be the defining factor about how he shows up.
Yeah.
That would be my...
Yeah, I really love what you said there, Jenni, on so many levels. And I think that one extra thing I want to bring up is that I don't know the right term, so I'm just going to say infighting. But I know, if from my experience in this disability space in the last 14 years, and with regards to my husband and his level of disability, that there's so much infighting that goes on. For example, this film came out about a quadriplegic that quite a few years ago that ended up killing himself, but it was actually a really beautiful love story, and it was a great story. But the picketing outside the cinemas by people in the wheelchairs saying, you're just trying to tell everyone that, if you're in a wheelchair, you should just die. And actually, it wasn't the case at all. It was a really beautiful film, and they had chosen not to watch it. They just didn't like what the trailers said about it or whatever. And that's what's always bugged Richard, is like, just because I'm in a wheelchair doesn't mean that I should be hanging out with other people in wheelchairs. Doesn't mean that we all have the same view on life, all because we're sitting in a wheelchair. It doesn't make any sense to assume that. It's like saying, if I've got curly blonde hair, then I'm going to be have the same thoughts as everybody else with curly blonde hair. You know, it's weird. So I think, and for example, what do they want to be known as? Like Richard says, I'm a cripple. People can't say cripple, you know, it's not the correct term any longer, but it is okay for him to say it because he wants to. And so that's fine. Some people will say he's differently abled. He'll go, I'm fully disabled. Like I'm actually completely disabled. But then at times he'll say differently abled. So, you know, it's really up to the person, isn't it? How it is that they want to say it. I was once saying to somebody that I'm hearing impaired, and they said, you're deaf, you wear hearing aids. And I went, I can actually still hear some though. So I'm hearing impaired. And why would I even need to have that argument? It's up to me.
You don't need to have the argument.
How I want to refer to it. It's very odd, isn't it?
I think that's a great point that you've made, Kylie. And referring back to my party, one of the other guests was blind and somebody was asking her questions. And she said, look, I could sit at home by myself in the dark, you know, if I wanted to, or I could just thank God for this one life that I've got and live the best life possible. Yeah. And I just thought, wow, you know, and she is a woman who's wow. She's married, she's had kids, you know, she's you know, she's president of a local association, you know, she's a mover and shaker. She's living her best life and she goes skydiving. I mean, I won't climb a bridge. She'll go skydiving, you know, like this is a courageous woman. But I just thought that's the attitude. I love that attitude that each of us only get one life. Let's live the best life we can. Yeah. And I think that, you know, if you meet someone who's different to you, firstly, you know, remember your manners that you were taught. Don't ask people personal questions. If they choose to share stuff with you, let them share. And if you think, well, I don't know whether to offer help or not, say to you, hi, do you need any assistance? I'm Maureen. Can I help you at all? Do you need any assistance? And then if they say no, you go, right, fine, thanks. And if they say yes, then please, by all means, help. But I mean, Graham's had the funniest story that ever happened to him was a guy, and people, as I said, they don't speak to him. They walked up to him when he was about to cross the road, and this was in the days before he had a guide dog and he had a cane. They grabbed the end of his cane and walked across the road. And Graham didn't want to cross the road, so he stayed on the sidewalk, but then the cane snapped and Graham's just standing there with like a rubber handle in his hand and no cane. This person, and Graham to this day doesn't know whether it was a man or a woman or who it was, because they never spoke, walks back to him and put the rest of his cane in the other hand. So Graham had to do a quick repair on the side of the road before he walked off down the street. Oh. But, yeah.
Oh, extraordinary. I'd love to bring up the word inspiring. I know that we've just gone over time, but the word inspiring is a really triggering word for a lot of people too. I've seen a lot of stuff on social media with people with disabilities saying, stop calling me inspiring. I'm just living. I'm just doing my thing. But I actually look at that really, really differently. So I look at my husband and I think he's the most inspiring human I know. What he's done, and I have this little saying in this spinal cord injury Facebook group that I started when he first had his accident, which was, it's not what happens to you, it's what you do with what has happened to you. Yeah. And so I think when I look at Richard and I think that was a guy just going about his business. He had a business, he was a dad, and he played rugby, and he was a really good human. Then he had his accident, and what he chose to do with his life after that accident is quite mind-blowing. And the way he goes about his business every single day does inspire people every single day. And I find him incredibly inspiring. I don't find that offensive to say that he's inspiring. Sometimes people have said that I'm inspiring and I'm a little odd about that. And then I've sat back and thought, if I put it in the way that I think of Richard in that way, then yes, I could have just crumbled and gone, this is just so hard. I'm just going to, you know, sit and cry in the room all day and feel sorry for myself. But I chose not to do that and move forward with, you know, finding the humor in each day and, you know, all that kind of stuff. So I think it's a really tricky thing, whether it's the word inspiring or it's the way people, like you were saying about people asking for help. We know people in the exact same situation as Richard that get furious when people offer help. And it makes people then not want to reach out and say, do you need some help? Richard, on the other hand, really appreciates it when someone offers help, because every single thing he does from the minute he wakes up, and including through the night when he's asking me for help, is he's constantly asking for help. So when someone offers it, that's one less time that he has to ask for it. And it feels really, really awesome for him. And if he doesn't need the help, he'll just politely say no, but then he'll say, but thanks so much for asking. He won't then abuse someone for offering that help.
Yeah. I mean, people say to me, oh, Graham's really inspiring. But I say to them, well, you think he's inspiring because he can walk around his neighbourhood and take his own bins in and out of it for the house. But I think he's inspiring because he's written, United Nations agreements that are now ratified around the world. That's what I think's inspiring, that he has just got on with his life and done what he's capable of doing and lived his best life. To me, it's not inspiring that he just gets on with it. That, to me, is the responsibility of all of us, because, we might have disability, or, we might face, discrimination because of our race, or, wherever we were born or how we were born or whatever. But if we all get on and live our best life, then, hopefully with the younger ones coming through with their greater tolerance, we will get to a point where we are just, human beings and valued as such.
That's great. I think if we can wrap it up with a do and a don't from each one of us. So Maureen, what would be one do and one don't that you'd like to share?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with a don't. Don't make assumptions about what people can do based on what you think. And that follows on the do is do ask.
Yeah.
Not the offensive questions, as, have you always been blind, or, don't ask those things, but do ask, can I help you, or do you need help? And then when the person says yes or no, say fine and accept their answer.
Beautiful. What about you, Jenni?
I would actually say, I think for me, similar to Maureen, but a slightly different take, in the fact that don't assume that someone who's different to you is coming from a place of lack or scarcity. So don't assume that what you're doing for them is to help them up or make them better or make you feel better. They're just, in many cases, they're as better or as the same as you. They're just human, right? So it's not about looking at people who are different from you as needing something or always needing something and coming from that place of lack. Because they're just a person living a situation that they have. Some can control, some cannot control. That's just who they are, right? So we shouldn't judge and make our conversation around, well, I need to help you because you're different to me. So I think it's similar to you, ask for help if you feel like it's appropriate, but don't just assume that people are coming from a place of lack because they're different. Just take them for who they are, which is a human. Be curious about them as a human being, not about their difference.
Yeah, yes. Beautiful.
Nice.
And what about your do?
Well, it's probably the combination of both. So I think the do thing with me is, if you don't know, maybe do some research and educate yourself first before asking the individual, because there's plenty of opportunities. Google is an amazing thing. So is the library. You can find information if you choose to want to see it. So don't just assume that so I would say do educate yourself.
Beautiful. Mine is the same for my don't and my do, which is don't be afraid to ask. Now, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to do it in an offensive way, but if you're like, for example, a few weeks ago when we were moving into Reconciliation Week, and I asked, the big question was, Jenni, how do we say it? What's the right way to word it? Is it offensive? Is it this? And if I hadn't asked the question, I wouldn't know. And I learned a lot from that conversation. So I think the important thing is, if you're not sure, if you want to really get some understanding around it, ask a question in a non-offensive way. And then if it seems that they're open to talk, then roll with it, because a lot of people do really want to share and help raise awareness on different things.
Great.
So I think my do is also then the same thing, which is do ask the questions that are going to help raise awareness, because at the end of the day, I'm all about raising awareness, because I truly think the only way that we can learn and the only way that we can expand as humans is by finding out more, researching, questioning, and that beautiful word Jenni often uses, which is wonder.
Yes.
A lot of time and wonder. I love that.
Thank you.
Yes,
I love that wonder.
Thank you so much. We've gone a little over, but yes, thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Maureen, thank you so much for your conversation. It has been such great to have you with us today in our bite-sized conversations. So where can people get in contact with you, Maureen, if they want to learn more about you?
Google me. My name is Maureen Shelley. I work for the Copy Collective. Google either of those terms, you'll find me.
Love it. And Kylie, where do we find you?
hellomedia.team, and that's on all the different social channels. And come and hang out with us in the Hello Media Facebook group where we have a bit of fun. What about you, Jenni?
I am Jenni Walke from Elephant in the Room, so you can find us at Elephant in the Room AU on Insta and Facebook, and from there you can find our webpage and all the other places you can find us. But that's where we like to hang out, is in Facebook.
Cool. And Jenni, what about our topic for next week? I'm super keen to be talking about women, and but we can move that to another week.
I think we should talk about that next week. I think 100% we should. That's definitely the topic for next week.
I think it's a good follow-on from today.
I think it's a very good follow-on today, because I think there's so many opportunities at the moment, and I think that you've got 3 very powerhouse women in the room today, and let's continue that conversation next week.
Wonderful. I look forward to it. All right, ladies.
Thank you, everybody.
That's another thing, isn't it? Some people don't like the term ladies.
No.
So, all right, women.
Have a fabulous day.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you.
And a great weekend, everyone. Thanks for joining us.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye-bye.